Okay, now that the carburetors are rebuilt, I'm going to reinstall them on the car. I didn't show the process of removing them, but it's pretty easy. Just disconnect the fuel lines, and then you unbolt the carburetors and disconnect some of the linkage here with these springs and the throttle cable and stuff like that. And so I'll just go through how to reconnect it. Okay, to fit the carburetors to the car, you basically have to assemble these parts off the car and then transfer them over together. And so this back throttle shaft here goes on like this. The center of the shaft goes into the nut hole here, and then this pin sits in this U channel right here, and then that's kind of on. And make sure that this bar should be towards the engine side, and then this shaft here with the adjustable length arms should be kind of the holes, or the mounting point should be facing the front carburetor. Now this front shaft goes on similarly. The center shaft goes into this front nut here, and then this pin sits into its place here on this plate. And then there's a longer side and a shorter side. The longer side goes towards the front of the car. Okay, so what I did was I zip tied it together. So I got the shaft in its proper places with the pin in the front and then in the back as well here, and then I just zip tied them into place so now they won't fall out. And I'm going to put the front one together. Or the back one, I should say. This is the aft. There. And now I'm going to zip tie those in place to hold it all together as I transfer it over to the car. Okay, zip tied that one. There we go. Okay, so feed this carburetor contraption in place. And bingo. Now it's on, and the shafts are still where they are supposed to be. Make sure all of them are lined up correctly. Good. Okay, now that I got the two carbs in, I got the nuts, washers, and lock washers in place, and I can now cut these zip ties and remove them because everything is now securely in place. Next, I'll reconnect this basically a distance shaft here with this ball receiver in the back here to the throttle cable, the shaft that the throttle cable is attached to. Basically just press that into place, and now these two shafts are linked. Alright, these nuts for the carburetor are 15 pound-foot torque spec, so you're never going to get a torque wrench in there, but just do it by hand. Just make them tight. You don't have to really crank them down Just has to seal the surface, make sure no air gets in there. With the gasket it should be fine, so 15 pound-foot is not that much. Okay, next I'm going to connect these back springs. It might be hard to see, but what I've done is I've just taken it off. Here's what it looks like. Taking it off the bottom pin, it connects down. Let me get a shot of it. Down here on the bottom of the heat shield, there's a couple of mounting points. There's one middle and two on the sides. The two on the sides go to these springs, and those connect to the back, to the throttle bar. And so back here, I can take this little J hook and connect it on the back side right in there. And then down, I'll need two hands for this, but I'll then reconnect it back down to this mounting hole down here on the heat shield, and do the same thing for the one on the front carb. Okay, now I'm going to connect the choke cable, which is still attached to this bar here that goes on the aft carburetor. So there's this kind of a washer with an extra hole here, and that's for the spring. I'll show you how to connect the spring here in a second. So basically just route that through the way you took it off. And then I'll put my split pin through the hole. Okay, there you can see the split pin through the hole there, and then I'll just kind of bend it into place to hold it all together. Okay, I'm going to bend this other arm of the split pin out of the way, and then you can bring that bottom spring up and connect it to that arm right there. And so now that spring is attached. Okay, there's some initial adjustments you got to make before you can actually start the car and tune the carb with the car warmed up. And so what I've got here is a 1/4 socket over the slow idle adjustment screw. And so basically I just turn that back and forth until I can't see any movement, or until it's just off of its lever that it attaches to. And actually, to see that, a good way to do it is if you got a smartphone, you can set it up on the other carb. You got to take the dash pod off anyway to do one of the next steps, and so you set it up there, and then you can zoom in and actually fine tune when you see movement on that plate that the screw hits. So I've got it basically right where I want it, and now I'll just take and I'll turn this 1/4 drive 1.5 turns, and that'll be the initial setting. Okay, now we're looking pretty much straight down. This is the next thing we need to adjust. I'm looking straight down. This is the fast idle screw back here, and the cam that it rides along. And you gotta make sure that when you move this front bar, that's 1/16 of an inch before it starts to move. And so I got it zoomed in really close, but it's about eyeballing 1/16 of an inch there. And make sure that they're both the same. So look at the one on the back here, which I can't get as good a picture of, but I can with my eyes, and so you just make sure they're both the same. Okay, and the last thing that we're going to set is the jet height. You could have done this off of the vehicle, which might have been easier, but I'm going to set, you're looking down through the intake here at the jet, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, so I want to get this jet here, the inner gold bit, to be flush with the bridge, which is the surface here. And so what I'll do is reach underneath and then twist the adjustment screw until I can twist it by hand. And so I'll do that until it's flush, which it feels pretty close to flush right now. Do it a couple more turns and see, yep, now I can feel it's bumping up. So I'll back it off, and basically it's clockwise as you're looking down upon it. Will move the jet down. And so I've got it pretty much flush right there. Okay, that's about flush right there. And now what I need to do is just turn that adjustment nut, and I'll get you a picture of that. Okay, so right into here, this is the adjustment nut for the jet right here. This is a locking nut, which is right at the top. That's already locked in place. And that just holds the bushing in there. And then this adjustment nut, the bottom one, which is a 15 millimeter, you want to turn that 2 turns clockwise as you're looking down on it to lower the jet. So 2 turns clockwise, and then that'll be the initial setting. Okay, so that's what it'll look like when you're 2 turns down from flush. Okay, for multi-carburetor setups, like I said, this slow idle adjustment screw here at the top is only 1 turn down, not 1.5 turns. So I just was rereading through the manual that came with this carb tune kit, or this carb service kit, and it says 1 turn for dual carburetors. So I'm gonna go back and undo half of the turn that I did. So it was 1.5 turns down, so clockwise. So now I'm gonna go anti-clockwise by a half turn. 1/2 turn there, and then on the other carb, 1/2 turn. There we go. And that'll be the initial setup, or the initial setting for that low idle adjustment screw. Okay, now I can reinsert the dash pot and the piston into the carburetor, but before I do that, I'm just gonna make sure one thing to check on the tuning portion of this guide is that this needle guide is flush here, and so that's flush with the surface, bottom surface of the piston. And so now that I've checked that, I'll put the carburetor, or this, back together. Before we put the dash pot back on for the rear one, I'm gonna reconnect this vacuum hose, and so that just kind of pushes down onto this nipple. Now I'll put the piston and the pot back on. Make sure throughout this time that you've been doing this and taking these on and off, make sure you don't mix them up. Just keep the aft one with the aft and the forward one with the forward, so you don't mix up the parts and pieces of your carburetor. Okay, there's one last check to do, and that's to raise and lower the piston here with this piston raising pin right here on the front, and it's on the back of the aft carburetor. And so you push that up, it'll raise the piston, then you drop it, and it should fall back down without any restriction. Now that the pots are back in, I can fill them back up with the SAE20 fluid and reattach my fuel lines. Okay, now I'm going to fit in the fuel drain here, the fuel return from the float. Okay, now that all the fuel cables or the fuel lines are reconnected, I'm going to go into the car, turn it to the on position without starting the car, just to prime the fuel pump, and then check for any leaks here in any of these fuel lines. It should fill the floats up to their position, and then the float needle should stop the flow of fuel. And so I'm just going to check all that to make sure that works. Okay, I feel down below here in these drain tubes that proceed out from the float, and I'm not feeling or smelling any fuel, so that means that the float is actually working and it's shutting off the fuel flow. Okay, next we'll fill up the damper oil, and so I've got this SU specific SAE20 oil, and what you're supposed to do is you look down into the dash pod here, and there's a round orifice that you'll see down there, and you're supposed to fill this up until it's a ½ inch. The oil level is a ½ inch above the top of that orifice level. Okay, next we're going to get ready for the multi-carburetor setup here, and what it says to do is slacken both the clamping bolts on the throttle spindle interconnects and on the cold start interconnects. So that's down here. These these nuts here on the back interconnect and the front interconnect. Slacken both of those so that you're basically separating the two carburetors so that they work independently. Okay, now that I've loosened up these nuts here, then each will move independently. So this one and the both sides will move independently. So now I use a balancing device like this. Basically you hold it over the front of the carb, and the suction will cause this little red float in there to move up, and you just basically balance the two carburetors to make sure that they're even, and while doing so adjust the throttle idle. So we're going to basically use these screws here, the idle adjusting screws here on the front carb, and then on the back carb here it's hidden in the video, but we use those screws to get the idle right and both balanced. And for purposes of checking my idle, I've connected up my Innova timing light here, which will show me the idle speed, and so that way I don't have to go into the car and keep checking out the tach. Okay, so the car started up obviously, and I'm just letting it get up to operating temperature. Just to let you know, with these initial settings that I have, the jet and the adjustment screws for the idle, it's idling around 1100 right now. Okay, so it may be hard to hear, but basically what I'm doing is I'm going back and forth and making sure that the bubble comes up the same amount for each carburetor. So you can see right now they're coming up to about this line. It doesn't really matter which line. You can set that by turning this inner dial here, how much suction it provides, but you just want it to be balanced. So sometimes you have to give it a little throttle just to make sure that they're running at their proper idle. And so if they aren't balanced, just turn down each of the screws until you get them balanced. Also, while watching your idle speed, make sure that you're at the right idle speed. Okay, so the next part I'm just going to explain it with the car off, because I don't have any hope that you guys are able to hear me with the engine running. So what you're going to do, and this is kind of a fiddly thing, and I'm pretty much going to say you're going to need some type of timing light or some type of multimeter that'll read your RPM, because it would be really difficult to do this, checking the RPM, if you have to go inside the car each time you do it. I mean, you can do it by ear if you really got some sensitive hearing, but what you're doing is basically you're messing with the jet screws. And so this is a 5/8 wrench, or the jet nuts, and this adjusting nut is the lower one down here, and you basically will turn that. I had to turn mine to the back of the car, so counterclockwise if you're looking down at the nut. And so basically I had to turn it several faces to get the engine RPM to be at its maximum. And you're doing this individually on each of the carbs. So you do, started with the front carb and did it until I got to the maximum RPM. And then it'll start to fall off if you turn it any more faces. By faces, I mean faces of the nut. So I just went one face at a time once I got it really close. And so once it starts to fall off, then you go back. So you turn it clockwise to lower the jet just until you reach that maximum RPM. And then you stop, and that's where you set that one. And then you do the same thing for the back. You go anti-clockwise, counterclockwise, or move the wrench towards the back of the vehicle as you're adjusting that nut on the rear carb, until the engine gets to its maximum RPM, and then it starts to drop off, and then you stop and you go back. So lower the jet or turn it clockwise just enough to get it to that maximum RPM. And so that's where it helps to have a RPM or a digital multimeter that'll read RPM, because it's more fine-tuned than the Smith's tack that you got in the car. And so that's what I did. I did the two of them, and then I had to go back and readjust the throttle or the idle position, again keeping them in balance, and adjust the idle down. Now on my vehicle, it does not like to idle at the book recommends 680 for an idle, and I don't know if this is because my motor mounts are going bad or what, but it shakes more than I like. The engine will shake more than I like at 680. So I adjusted my RPM up to 800, and it runs pretty smooth at 800. And so I balanced them at 800 versus 680. Now yours might do fine at 680 per the spec, and this is for a manual transmission car. I think the automatic is a higher RPM that they want you to idle at, and so do that. But I'll just let you know, because if you have issues trying to get yours to 680, then you're not alone. I had issues trying to get mine to 680. Okay, next it says to set the throttle interconnect clamping levers in accordance with the vehicle manufacturer's instructions. And if we look in here, it says that the throttle lever move until the lever pin rests lightly on the lower arm of the fork. So they have a little picture here when the pin rests on the lower level of the fork. Let me show you what that looks like in the vehicle. If I can get a close-up here. So what we're talking about here is here's the pin. Let me get the light on the situation here. Alright, so here is the pin right here, and you can see since I don't have this nut tightened, it freely moves up and down here, and so they say to have it resting on the fork. So here's the fork, and it goes underneath there, and so I'll move this pin until it's resting on the fork, and then I'll tighten it down, and I'll do that also for the front carb. Alright, next what it says to do is run the engine up to 1500 RPM. Basically try to hold it there at 1500, check the float to see if both carbs are running even. And that'll tell you if your linkage here on this back interconnect is correct. Mine actually, the front carb is getting a little bit more throttle than the back carb, so I think I pushed my front carb a little bit too far into this arm, and so I need to adjust it. Alright, now we're down to the last step here. So it says with the fast idle cams of each carburetor against their respective stops. So the fast idle cams against the stop. So that's against the stop here. Check that, set the cold start into connection so that all cams begin to move simultaneously. So all cams should move simultaneously when this interconnect moves, obviously, and they should move about the same. They should be clocked about the same position, and that kind of goes into the next step. Check that 1/16 free movement of the mixture control choke cable exists before the cable moves the cam. So there should be like some free play of the choke cable, and we can set that after the choke cable is in its position. And then it says to pull out the mixture control choke until the linkage is about to move the jet. And so you can kind of get a feel for how much movement that is if you look down at the jet over on the side as you're manipulating this interconnect. And it's right about there. So from there down to there is about the right amount of movement. And then it says next we have to start the car using the balance meter or listening tube, ensure equal adjustment, and turn the fast idle screw to give the correct balance. So we'll set the choke with the choke cable until it's just about to move the jets, and then we'll leave it there. We'll start the car, and whatever speed it's at, we will listen, or we'll use our balance meter to make sure that it's balanced. And if it's not, we will manipulate these fast idle screws back here. They're hard to get to. You got to reach behind each of these lever arms and adjust these screws from the back. Sometimes needle nose pliers might be helpful, but then we'll just do that until the chokes or the carburetors are balanced. So basically what I've determined is it possible to connect this plate back on and still be able to use your balance meter. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold it with my hand until it's the jet's just about to move. Right about there. And then I'll check the balance. And luckily they're both in balance, and so I'm done. Alright, once you do that, then everything is set. Make sure, go back out and tighten up. Make sure that you didn't miss any bolts or anything like that. Make sure that everything is tightened down. Refit the air cleaner, and then you are good to go. Then I'll go take it for a test drive and make sure that in all RPM ranges the engine runs smoothly and accelerates without hesitation. That's the basics of how to tune the HS6 carburetors on MGC. I hope that helps somebody. I know I did this video a long time ago, and there was some missing parts to that video, so I'm going to put a link in the description of that video to this video to make sure that people watch the updated video. This one is definitely got more correct, the more correct way to do it than the last video. And again, I'm not an expert on SU carburetors, so again, I was just following along with the book. So if I miss something, or if you think that there's an easier way to do something, please leave a comment below, and that'll help other people. Thanks for watching.